Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another SixyTimes Battle Lounge with the 2MK team. Today we are looking into how to open up defensive players without necessarily using the same amount of, let's call it, things that we normally do. I am your host, Rillian, and I will probably have a lot to say. I haven't been able to say much lately because of being sick, but now there's at least a chance. Kasumi in particular is good at making sure that people don't understand what's coming next. But that's not enough to open people up in this game necessarily, because while you can't overcome them a little bit just by the difficulty in knowing where to block, basically high or low, most lows in this game don't lead to a lot of damage or setup situations. So at best, you're just going to annoy most players a little bit. Annoying people is helpful though, because if you can get their mental state twisted up enough, they'll just get irritated at what's going on regardless. It's not a strong main strategy to have. You would have to have good enough neutral to be fairly sure that you were going to win the rest of the time anyway. For this to be a primary thing you should do, pressure is way better as a whole for dealing with this particular situation. But there are times where you simply have to do it simply because your opponent is too good at defending and understands their spacing too well. An opponent who is very intent on playing neutral with you has more options, but they also end up sometimes having to partially guess at what to do and giving you a chance. Maybe you can bait them into hitting something. But a defensive player who understands spacing well enough knows that you can't hurt them and just doesn't do anything specific until you have made an error. Mostly they spend their time fooling you into thinking that you have an advantage that you don't really have, and in DOA that matters a lot more than other games. Today we've set the matches to just one. It's been noted before that generally when players are joining this one... I thought I unlocked this. How rude. Yes, I have chosen not to play my character because I can't use the correct thing. I don't know what I was expecting because that data couldn't have been saved anywhere else. This is our NA stream, which means if you are anywhere on the rim of the Atlantic Ocean, you probably have a good connection to the people in this lounge. If you are in the Midwestern United States and have good internet, you probably still do, at least today, since we're not seeing at the moment most of the people who don't necessarily live on the East Coast. We are expecting people to join later, and this is Winner Stays On today because I was mostly not expecting a lot of people very quickly. And here we are. This is true of players that aren't necessarily that defensive too. Just knowing, oh, I have my turn now, you can't do this thing, comes up a lot. But despite the fact this game has lots of intricate and cool looking combos, it, let's say, suffers the same fate as many others. Those things are not things that lead to a lot of damage most of the time. Defeating your opponent properly in neutral, understanding their options and yours, does a better job. This isn't true for every character, but it's true for enough characters that you should spend some time caring about it. Notice, for example, that the two of us are quite good at staying just at the edge of the other's range and finding the right move to use to beat the situation. Including throws. This twistiness is the way that you get your opponent to lose confidence in all of their main moves, forcing them to use different ones, at least sometimes, until they've managed to catch you with one and create a situation where either pressure can happen or a perfect spacing for them can happen. And pushing on your opponents in that way normally leads to both your growth and theirs. But if the response to this happening is, again, to just block, you're not specifically trying to whiff punish, you're just waiting for your opponent to misspace themselves in some way. I guess I should play Kasumi again since this explanation isn't quite over. If you wanted to do this against most opponents in serious matches, you would have to understand nearly all of their normals. Experience would be the main thing that helps you. You can get quite a lot from just playing other games and understanding where you want to stand both as a player and in the game you're playing. So if you are a fan of multiple fighting games, there may be some ways to get that information, not necessarily by playing this game. It is, in fact, one of the main things of the team in general that we don't necessarily play any given game that often. But understanding your own flows in other games can even tell you when you're making mistakes, in the sense of mistakes you've literally never made before. Because you can look at the situation and go, oh, I wouldn't have done that way if I were playing X game with Y character. Why did I do it here? This comes up a lot in our matches because we both understand how the other fights in other games so well. Leading to sequences like that one mostly. Alright, we'll play Nico. And complain about the lack of things. It always weirds me out when I look at this screen and think to myself, that's not my controls. But there's no good reason for it to show off mine. Some games do this, as it's a lot more effort to make it so it doesn't change it apparently, but Nico tends to stay a lot closer to the opponent, and she does have just as many tricks, but she does not have as many ways of getting into position to do them if she's out of position at the time. This allows Ami to do more active defense, but since her throws are more effective at staying in good positions, and she seems to have very slightly better throw range, or basically encourages people to block differently, making it a little bit easier for me to pick up situations of throws. But this is also something that Ami is familiar with, because this is just me switching from Chun-Li to Colleen, functionally. Which means one has to be ready to tech my throws at nearly any time. This doesn't work if I try to pressure with Nico, despite the fact that her pressure isn't bad. Yeah, I'm unwilling to believe that this character doesn't just have better throw range. Wait, didn't I explicitly pick the other? No, probably not. Well, we went from having one with, I think, a lot of people in it and not me, to one that most people are not in fact joining today. She is still very much an all-rounder character when you are not paying attention to the little extra bits that she does. And I believe, from what I've seen, her combo theory is a little bit higher and more complicated than a lot of the other characters in this game. Not necessarily in how she does damage, but having to learn a number of different combos to continue from certain positions. But obviously I can't complain given that that is in fact one of my strengths in games as a generality. That longer throw range also leads to a different situation. There are many times when not only is the throw the whiff punish, the throw is the correct solution for when your opponent has landed a combo but isn't in range to finish it. Hugs. The downside is, of course, even though she has the same strength as Kasumi of you can't be sure which combo I'm going to do, she also takes a lot more damage when she gets them wrong. In general, one might think that this sort of character is one whom you should hit more buttons against, but the answer is usually not to do that. It is to spend more time thinking about how to throw her. It happens in a lot of games where your main option against grapplers is simply to throw them first. Defending yourself in other ways might lead to longer combos and sometimes better damage, but overall, the mindset difference is going to cause you some problems. I'm not going to stand in places where it matters. I'm not going to hit buttons at the timings that you expect. And therefore, what this match is supposed to look like, at least between us two, is a lot of throws and throw attacking. But technically, this is better for Honoka because she is simply slightly better at fighting from throw positions. Miko is relying mostly on the opponent either being unwilling to do anything against her, or being just within range due to their own mistake and then getting thrown. She doesn't throw people in her own combo strings or similar setups as often. Lots of knockdown, lots of confusing things, but you can see that sort of thing. After a while, relatively quickly into most of her better combos, and better from my perspective anyway, Miko staggers the enemy for a relatively long time and pushes them away from her, meaning that just getting to throw as a generality doesn't work out well. Similarly, when she has other options, they usually involve being further away to be safe. And in that way, sometimes you can consider it to be a weakness that her throws leave her so close. She needs a new lanyard. It can't be all that hard. There's nowhere to promote her anyway. Oh no, a drop or something. Oh, that's what went wrong there. I'm told that the lounge did not get formed in the way I intended, and I never noticed. Yep, that was the problem. This was something that Omni was complaining about earlier today while making the lounge. It's too easy to miss a setting because it just lets you confirm with whatever. So when I was changing the map slots, I must have also unintentionally changed the player amount. Onward then. I ended up caught up too much in the actual fighting then. But now I'm getting told that there's no lobbies visible. How terrible. Hopefully it will resolve itself soon. But I'm not willing to count on it. One of the largest benefits to Nico as a character is that aside from being misleading, she's also very fast for that space. Advancing moves help quite a lot, as do moves that simply don't have your character stand in the standard places. And of course, there's a lot of weirdness that can be mistimed, but she is also very good at getting out of the way. But this opponent is ready for the various throws and whiff punish throws, partially because the way that Helena plays means that you spend less time committed to stuff that's happening after a move has whiffed. Additional reach makes it even easier to deal with Nico's various positions, and that would mean that I need to start figuring out what's likely to happen from my opponent's side and how to hold the punish, because she's not usually unsafe entirely. I could probably block through a lot of this, but blocking is just not going to help as much when the opponent is already thinking about the fact that throws are the game. See? The spacing, the differences make such a change to what is happening on the screen compared to before. But being more aggressive isn't necessarily going to help. I mean, being aggressive enough that the opponent has to think about it will help, but overall just general more aggression isn't going to get me anywhere. See? Even that moment was probably 3 different things happening in quick succession, rather than this is a way that I could consistently win that interaction. You can immediately see a better demonstration of what I was talking about before, actually. I face an opponent who will not only block, but also has a specific tendency to when their holds happen. And a character who can mostly hit buttons for a while. Now, this means that Nico's main strengths still exist, but I have to focus now on making sure I actually end combos instead of trying to confuse the opponent at all. Similarly, even when I'm close, the thought isn't, okay, I should go for throw here. It's explicitly, I should hit even more attacks. And just use her strong proclivity to get out of the way of just about everything, to get through the situation that way. Similarly, I could try to measure my opponent's ranges and make holds at that space instead, as that might get them to do a bit more holding still long enough to be thrown, but it's not necessarily a good idea anyway. The question still stands, what do I want the most out of this matchup flow? Yes, please, new data. Ayane's relentlessness definitely helps in the same way, but it doesn't actually cover most of the spaces that she'd want it to. As Ayane, unlike Kokoro, can actually be fairly easy to just hold once you see her stuff coming, because she tends to do the same thing, not necessarily over and over again, but you can tell what she's doing when she starts it a lot more easily. And though she does fight particularly well from longer ranges, it's not in a way that Nico generally worries about. They both have that strength of the opponent having difficulty moving into their space due to the power that comes with their mobility. They use strikes to start off with that make things harder for the opponent to do anything in terms of approaches, and can continue their combos even after your opponent sidesteps out quite a lot. She also has Kasumi's strength of being able to change the timings of her moves enough that you can't just go, I know what's happening here. Nico's particular quick, snappy strike speed technique means that it's a little bit harder to do that from her side. I think that was mistimed pressure. 3D games often allow you to stand up after being knocked down at your own pace or timing. Even when you are specifically going to use a recovery option, you still often can do that more or less when you feel like, more so than just, hey, I either must do this right now or I don't get to do it at all. This is partially why we consistently advise that you not necessarily go for pressure unless you're relatively confident your opponent will get up immediately for some reason. But instead, move to your own character's optimal spacing versus that matchup. And if you don't know what that is, maybe then you can go for pressure. It's a good feat. I'm not even sure if it was meant to be one, but it was a good one regardless. The longer animations of moves in this game, combined with the way that the opponent's character moves in order to get up, means you can often get away with this regardless. You can see them start to stand up. The game does not necessarily move at a speed where that's not possible. But because most of that animation is the same regardless of what they plan to do after it, you still have to care. There is still often a guess involved, meaning that you're still better off if you can manage to get out of the main range of their wake-up options. Saturday means lots of people coming and going, but I presume either because they can see that the ping to others is not great, or that they might have to wait quite a while. There's not exactly as many reasons to stick around. Dealing with this situation has a lot to do with understanding how to block Ayane's attacks. Not necessarily because blocking them is a great idea, but simply that if you don't manage to react to her first attack and she gets in closer, you generally don't have time to decide the hold on the next attack unless you not only know the character really well, but also know your opponent really well. Oof, spacing is so perfect today. Alright then. And this is probably exactly what I was talking about. When my opponent's spacing is this good, the only way to be sure is to block the correct thing. But because she's normally not going to leave herself open to counterattacks in the standard sense, particularly against Nico's flows, the only way to make sure that you get away from situations is to block correctly at all times. There are points in her movement where it is clear what's going to happen, so you could in fact get the hold you needed. But she could also just throw you then and everything will fall apart. See? I was thinking, okay, the third hit of that is normally a punch, right? I've never even seen that kick before. And this is intentional. There are certain characters who are just like that. You don't want to spend your time trying to figure out what they are doing. You just want to defend it until you see them do something you actually understand or recognize. Thankfully for me, Nico is another one of said characters. Unfortunately, her running in skill seems to be a little lower than I'm used to, so... Fortunately, she also has enough tools for approaching Ayane that lead to her specifically getting to do trickery afterward. And forcing Ayane to react to that trickery makes it a little bit easier. But, spin to win. this lounge is probably staying open for a while, even if the stream is ending basically now. I think we're going to have one more on stream for the night. But after that, you can assume that the stream itself is going to end. Tomorrow's content is up in the air. We might not, in fact, have Absolver's content tomorrow. But you can generally assume that, aside from that, we are on track for our usual amount of streams and content this week as a whole. Meaning you will be able to watch Mishmash Monday Battle Lounges in Street Fighter V, and the Tuesday Melt. Melty Blood type Lumina content. It is in fact almost unfortunate that we are ending when we are. Normally I limit this lounge so that you cannot join it if you are above B rank, but a lot of people don't like sit around at B rank in this game. Most people are either people who play in lounges casually or, you know, somewhat seriously, but who therefore have relatively lower ranks as far as I understand it, and people who really push themselves and tend to be A rank or higher. The usual problem of the middle ground players of a game not being terribly into it compared to either the people who play occasionally or the people who play really hard. But it looks like we're still headed toward the end of the stream, and there's not much chance that anyone else is going to get a lot of time in, so join in if you'd like to. But this has been Rillian for Team 2MK. You can find all of our bots. Sadly, the ones for this game are useless, since they don't stay even between matches, but if you are interested in other games or just want to train without actually fighting online at all, you can find those all at 2-mk.org, our website, and any information on us streaming, or in some cases not streaming, as we did today, will be on our Twitter 2_mk_FGC. That's all for tonight, everyone. Good luck with your training.